I want to keep returning to the alien thing as sort of maybe our backbone, because it's
Please do.
another. It's all focused on what we can see, quite literally. It's investing now. What do we have evidence? A radar. There it is. What have you seen? And they talk about how they appear and then disappear, or how they can go
Yeah.
underwater or come
Hmm.
out of mountains, but they can change form and work with physics in ways we can't, that are impossible. And in many ways, that seems to be what we're struggling with as a people, that I struggle with. Many of us do. The hardest things are the things we can't prove, that I can't touch, that I can't get direct evidence on, because it's completely confounding to our entire system that wants to say, I can control that, I can identify it, I can catalog it, I can put it in a box. In many ways, even AI, or the internet itself, it's like the things that they create collectively are in a sense unseen. We can make maps of it, but what is the effect of us being connected with the internet? What is the effect of AI having billions of AI disparate forms? What does it create? And we struggle with this.
Welcome back to the transmission, my friends, and I must say you have oriented your qualia toward an excellent emanation of this broadcast, because we've got my man East Forest. He's best known as a musician who constructs heart erupting, beautiful, psychedelic melodies, but he's also really a kindred spirit because he has just centered his life around the mystery. You hear it in his music, for sure, but you'll also hear it in his speech surrounding topics like consciousness, spirituality, and also UFOs, UAPs, aliens, which is obviously a drippingly novel topic right now, one that I've also been paying attention to, that I've been following with great interest. And I think I can promise you that we're going to hit some angles of this conversation, of this topic, that you haven't considered, because I'll be honest, I think we surprised ourselves a bit with this mind meld and where we went with it. I think we managed to tie the UFO topic in all of its cosmic, vexing, impossible to understand glory. I think we managed to somehow tie it back to the personal, to our own psyches, to our own quest to make sense of the human condition. That, and of course, much more throughout the scope of this mind meld with East Forest. And with that, my friends, let's not delay, but do, as soon as possible, tickle that algorithm with a like, a sub, a share, a comment. All of it is supremely important. I'm doing my utmost to bring you quality, deep diving wonder dips and transmissions. All I ask in return is that you tickle said buttons. Portals for everything that you require for East Forest, including his site and his music. By the way, he has some fantastic recent singles that are out now: Patience and Cosmic Dance off his upcoming album, Music for the Deck of the Titanic. You can listen to those right now. Necessary keyboard mudras for all things Third Eye Drops are in the description as well. By the way, did you know we've got over 300 audio-only pods that will never manifest here in the YouTube dimension? You've got to subscribe over at Apple Pods, Spotify, wherever you consume your audio content if you want to hear those. And come initiate yourself into our Wonder Lodge over at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops. It's not only the best way to support the show, you can join in on Zoom Wonder Dips with myself and guests you've heard on the show. Get to know 150 other Third Eye Drops patrons. Join a patron-only Discord server, get rewards like stickers, pins, shirts, and more. And with that, my friends, let's meld minds with the brilliant, multi-talented East Forest. I had to hit record because we're going some interesting places, and we're
AI
skirting.
and aliens we can talk about, and I feel like they also in some ways might
Oh, they're gonna
be the
merge.
same thing.
They're gonna merge. You know they're gonna
Yeah.
merge. We're skirting ceremony here, because actually people who watch this and listen to it don't really know, because usually I edit out the deep breath. But I almost always do, or I do always do a 3, 2, 1, then a synchronized deep breath with the guest, just to sort of drop into the space, because everybody's busy, everybody's doing stuff, everybody's got all this stuff on their mind. So I find it to be useful and just bifurcate, what came before to what came after. But anyway, we skipped that because we're just coming to this one so hot,
Well,
talking
let
about
me tell you
aliens,
something
talking
though.
about AI. Yeah.
I was at a Lizzo concert and she did it like in the middle of actually 2/3 into her set. Very high energy set, dancers, the whole thing. And all of a sudden, the stage goes dark and on the screen it's like Lizzo. What did it say? Like higher self or something? And she starts going like it goes like 3, 2, 1. Let's all take a deep breath together. And we breathe. And I was like, is this really happening? And then she says, imagine your higher self. And she goes, damn, you look good, higher self. Look at it's got this whole thing about, self-confidence. And then and it was like 3 to 5 minutes, and we came back to the concert. And she's like, did we just drop into some meditation? I was like, I think we did. And I was like, I guess you could drop it in the middle of your show.
And then you sued her
Yeah, I
because
see.
because that's your thing. But I was hoping you were going to say she turned the lights out and then she just unzipped her human suit and she was made of
Yeah.
four different beings.
Ooh, you can't say that anymore. Yeah. One being, Michael, she's not. Yes, we can't shame anyone for their sizes or
Oh,
anything
that's
like
not even
that.
what I was going for at
Oh,
all. I was just
four,
to say, like,
four
because
beings
aliens are
came out of one
small.
Lizzo.
But yeah,
She
get
had an
myself.
amazing show. Amazing show. I was quite
Um,
impressed.
but we are. I think it's impossible for anybody who's even at a cursory or surface level to be interested in this topic of extraterrestrials to not want to talk about it right now, because we just had this testimony like the day that we're recording. It was yesterday, so it was the 26th, where these whistleblowers, very high ranking former intelligence and military personnel, are sharing their personal experiences in some cases, and in some cases it is hearsay, but with what can only be described as hyper advanced, like probably otherworldly technologies.
Yeah,
And what really hit me about it this morning, man, is of course we've all heard this is a psyop. This is to distract from this. This is just this advanced technology that they don't want you to know about. So they're saying it's extraterrestrials. But what hit me is that now we're at the point that not believing requires a conspiracy theory. Not
yeah,
believing requires you to make up some, you know, orchestrated crazy thing, like to the point where are all these Congress people in on it? Or
dude.
is it just, yeah, go ahead.
Maybe it's coming out now because we're in a post-truth era, and they're like, you could have a ship land in the middle of like
Yeah,
fucking in front of the White House. It's all on video, and still
totally.
half the country be like, no, that's fake, or it's this, or it's actually Biden trying to distract from. It doesn't even matter anymore. So perhaps in our this Trumpian post-truth era that we live in, it's like impossible for us to even have revelations. I mean, I would have thought that. Well, okay, I have a song coming out on the record that Duncan Trussell talks on, and I've talked to him on my podcast, and I sampled
Yeah.
it, and largely it started with this. It was like, he's like, the song's called "So What" because the message is like, so what? Like, let's say the aliens do land. Let's say we find out there is an ice wall, the whole bit, whatever. The world is flat, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
say,
yeah.
let's say you find out. It's like, so what? Like, you still have to figure out your shit. You still have to eat.
Yep.
And in some ways, I saw that headline even today, like amongst my news feed about like Pentagon, blah blah blah, cover up, alien technology, beings have been we found bodies, and it's just another news story, you know, just like, and then back to like the celebrity thing, and back to this bullshit, and I, I'm just think we live in a very odd time where certain things you're like, if or even like climate news or mass shootings, we're just inured to this.
Yeah.
And it's like, what if this is true? I mean, in one hand, we accept that the galaxy and the universe is so big, it mathematically has to have more life, and probably intelligent life, just by the size. Just a numbers game is statistically a one versus, that is true.
Hmm, hmm.
But are they contacting us, or are they in our vicinity? There's so much evidence, if you've been paying
Yeah.
attention, that there's something going on.
Yeah.
Fermi paradox type stuff. It's like, but yet no one cares anymore in a weird way.
Yeah. So true, man. Yeah, I think
It's so weird.
the most novel, the most cataclysmic, the most out there things can happen, and we're all just numb to it at this point. It all hardly even registers on our barometer because of just how wild everything is. And it's funny because I don't know if you've noticed this, but among like a certain caliber of intellectuals, the idea of McKenna's novelty wave theory has started to become very poo-pooed and brushed off as this like ludicrous idea. But set aside whatever like weird technical prognostications he was making to try to show that the novelty waves are actually increasing. Let's just all ask ourselves subjectively, is the world getting weirder at a breakneck pace that we cannot comprehend? And the answer
Hmm.
is clearly yes. We have hyper intelligent AI that's indistinguishable from talking to a real human being. We have UFO disclosure upon us. We have quantum computing. We could just keep listing off these world
A
breaking
political
technologies.
system that is
Yeah,
completely turning into a clown show of
absolutely.
absurdity, where like
Yeah,
parties are switching, what they used to be, but way
yep,
beyond that, where it's like the craziest things are happening. Where it's like things you would
yeah,
not believe a few years ago. If like, yeah, this is what like someone would be saying,
100%.
or
And I think part of that fatigue too, I think to any critical thinking person does lead to a questioning of the mainstream narrative on anything. And it's funny because I just said that now not to believe in UFOs requires a conspiracy, but I think that I might be down with the conspiracy to an
but
extent
not to
because
not believe. You see, yeah.
not to fully not believe, but that like do I believe now that something else is being suppressed that they already know at a minimum? Oh, has to be, man. Has to be. Like there's so many things
The
that
motivations get very strange
yeah,
because this narrative goes back a long time.
yeah.
The false flag narrative. I mean, so if you go back like pre 2012, there was this idea.
Please don't
So
get
you
me
got
demonetized.
there's different arms to the alien world, and I got into this back around 2008. So I was
Yeah.
into like that era, and I kind of found the bottom of it, and I was like, oh, okay. But one
What
of
did you
those
consider to be
arms,
the bottom? What did you consider to be the
I went
bottom?
to an alien conference.
Oh,
Yes.
oh. This
Like
is
I
probably
actually
breaking
paid
news. I don't
money.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was camping. It was not too far from my home. I was in Portland, Oregon, and on Mount Adams near the base, there's I think they call it I don't know, SET, something research center, whatever. It's basically a farm at the base of the mountain. And they would claim that there are a lot of ships going into the mountain. They would just see this all the time. And they hosted a conference there where hundreds of people would come. And I thought, well, this isn't too far from me. I can go for the day or 2 days. And I went thinking, like, I'm very interested in this subject. And I listened to the talks and I met a lot of people and we went out watching for ships. I even hiked up to the mountain and spent the night near the summit to just see for myself. I saw nothing, and I
Damn.
saw when we were down there and people are pointing stuff out. I remember a guy had an app and it would track the International Space Station, and he would say like in like 7 minutes it will start over here and cross the sky, and sure enough there it is. It's quite large,
Yeah.
and other people are like, that is a ship, and another guy's like, no, 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 it's the space station, and they're like, no, it's a ship. And then I realized, oh, what people see or
Yeah.
want to believe is all over the map. And
Totally.
now all the different stories I hear, I'm not saying they're not all true. I'm just saying like I need to have a bit more deference
Discernment.
and
Yeah.
yes. And I also saw talks in there that were just over the top for me. Like this one dude, his research in air quotes was taking recordings and playing them backwards of politicians and showing us like the messages in there. And I'm just like, give me a break. And dimensional messages through like Donald Rumsfeld or whatever, or people taking photographs and showing us the orbs. And I was a professional photographer at the time. And I was like, well, that's just light artifacts or dust. That's light. I mean, it's no big deal. And they're like, this is a whole phenomenon and the communications, and people start taking pictures in the room. Like, there's 1,000 orbs around us right now. And I'm just like, look, I'm not saying orbs don't exist, but that's not an orb. Pretty sure. Pretty
Yeah.
sure. So anyway, one arm of it is this disclosure arm where they're like the government knows they're hiding it. It's all about the people slowly bringing it out through the government. And it's going to happen. And the people heading up that movement are not the most like, why does it have to be guys like Stephen Greer or like
Right,
if
right, right.
anyone knows who that is, who's like a doctor who's also a muscle building guy who's also just kind of generally creepy and and then of course turns it into a whole industry of money and things, and like he's the guy who everyone's coming to that he can't tell you who they are, but they're all
Yeah.
quote high level officials,
Right.
right?
That's good. That's the slippery slope because your intentions can be pure when you start doing these things. And by the way, I have not gone down his particular rabbit hole very deeply,
Ah,
so I'm not making any character
don't.
judgments on him. I know him. I know that I know generally who he is. But anyway, I'm
But
not saying this
then when you
about
see like
him.
these government hearings, right, which they've done smaller ones in the
Yeah.
past, so this isn't the first, but when you see it and it's making more press, it does make you be like, what is it can't possibly be that that guy was right, or like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or was it John DeLong or Stephen DeLong, the guy from
Tom DeLonge.
Tom DeLong,
Yeah, yeah,
who's
yeah, yeah.
you know the
I grew up
main
listening to his
dude,
band, man. So it's so weird. Yeah, I was definitely that was the first riff I ever learned on guitar. Was "Damn It," bam, ba
right?
bam, ba
And
bam,
he's
bam,
one
ba
of the
bam.
guys leading the charge of sort of his arm
It's
of like disclosure, and but then you see it make. I mean, it's Terrence McKenna would say like when people would see alien sightings or ships, and I've said this probably before with you, but they would ask them first, "Well, were you loaded? You know, what
right.
were you on?"
Yeah,
And he would say, "Of course I was loaded. That's why I saw the UFO."
right, 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 right.
And but more, he'd also say the absurdity. Like, why is it that a lot of the people they are like strange people or like country bumpkins who say they were
Yeah.
anally probed? It's like there's always these elements of just like clownism, almost absurdism.
But then you have to ask yourself too how much of that is orchestrated to make it seem preposterous. You know, like
But why?
how
Why would they? Why
that's the
would they
psyop.
abduct? You know, there you go. And then, so the other arm of it is like, oh, we actually have all this technology because we got the ships. We found, you know, one was an archaeological. We found it. One
Yeah,
crashed in Roswell. We have like 8 of them. And this
yeah.
is more the what's the guy's name who's very well known, who's on Joe
Oh,
Rogan,
Lazar, Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar.
Yeah,
That thing, like we have this stuff. We're trying to reverse engineer it. That's where microwaves came from, your oven, a few other technologies, but largely we're still trying. But we can fly some of them around. So a lot of the ones you're seeing is actually us cruising around.
right,
I'm not sure I
right.
believe that. And then this idea that like the whole benevolent alien arm, that's another arm, like sort of like the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, is like,
Yeah,
and we're in fifth dimensional beings and we're communicating through channels, people who channel like Bashar and or books like
yeah,
Barbara Marx Hubbard or so forth and so on. And that then there's a whole criticism like those people have actually been co-opted and it's all a false flag. Like it's actually these aliens come in peace, but it's not peace. They've been controlling us since the dawn of time. And then you get
yeah.
into lizard people and like George Bush is a lizard and that kind of thing.
Dude, it's the Chapel Perilous has always been one of my favorite ground levels of sense making because it's a paradox right out of the gate. As soon as you cross the threshold of or make the realization rather that my subjective reality is all that I have, therefore it's valuable. However, my subjective reality is also riddled with bias. It's completely contingent on factors that I fundamentally do not understand. Like, we still don't understand what consciousness is. We know the brain obviously plays a very important role, and neurotransmitters and exogenous chemicals can greatly alter your perception of reality. But you know that your perception of reality is fundamentally tied up in all of these paradoxical features, basically, where you're totally reliant on it to survive, but it's problematic in all kinds of ways. It's like I said before, riddled with bias in all kinds of ways, yet that's your only sense making apparatus. So, how do you extract truth from that? And now add on the fact that we're in just an absolute tornado of chaotic, contradictory information, and they just keep throwing more layers of confusion on top of it. Aliens, AI, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, this is a ramble that I've discussed a lot recently, but I don't think it can be talked about enough, because so many people, I think, are out there just in that state that you described earlier, where they're numb to the information, where even if they're interested, they're still mostly numb to it because there's just too much going on.
Oh, it's
It's
nervous
all,
system
yeah.
overload.
And then, not to mention, just you still have obligations. You still have to go to work. You still have to pay your bills. You still have to
Yeah, the
maintain
so
your
what? So what,
relationships.
man? You still
Yeah.
gotta, apparently exercise, and what are you gonna have for lunch, and make a little money and pay your taxes. And
Yeah.
I but I also think it's important to talk about this, to step back, because it's only gonna get stronger day by day. And as you said, we're feeling it. So it's like, well, if that is the case and it's a runaway train, I would say, so what? What are you gonna do about it
Yeah.
personally? Because, for instance, okay, the amount of news and content, I don't know if this was when we started or before, we were talking about like AI uh, starting
Yeah.
to create content for us and everyone else. Now there's just more content. This
Yeah.
is coming. It's already happening. So what does that mean? When we get to a world where like we have 10x, 100x, a million x availability of content coming at us. Uh, just the greenhouse gases alone from that much more electricity churning in the internet, um, and what if it's already happening? Probably there already are news stories right now being written by, we know, ChatGPT,
Oh,
where
yeah.
humans
No,
are.
they are.
So
Yeah.
what if some of these alien stories are actually just, they're picking up algorithmically that that's something that'll get read, so let's write more of them, but then it just creates more like, is this even true? And then what if like the aliens themselves are this transdimensional being that is working through AI to help
Yeah.
create a bridge of consciousness to work with our I mean, this is getting very weird, but it's like, maybe,
Yeah.
and it doesn't change the fact that we're just human beings trying to make sense of all of this, and we're way too plugged in.
Yeah.
And the solution is like, get a neural link so you can handle more bandwidth, or we're going to go to Mars when this Earth is crapped out, or now Threads is the answer, or whatever it is. It's like, we just can't. We keep trying the same solution to the same problem, and
Right.
it doesn't work. It's a Tower of Babel.
Yeah. We keep reaching for complexity when what we need is simplicity. We,
Sounds
we
like
need to
physics,
we need
right?
to
It's
take
like
things away. I'm so with you that we need to take things away at this point, because adding more is not going to fix anything.
we're like a
Like
spoiled child, right? It's
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no more toys. It's like,
Yeah. And
take
and
some
I
toys
do.
away, get them out in the nature,
Right. Yeah.
pretty simple, and get a better diet in that kid, you know,
Yeah.
get him off the
Yes.
Adderall.
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully, God. Um but yeah, I've thought this before, that eventually, so for one, for sure, the simplicity, and so much of what you do is a lubricant toward that simplicity, at least temporarily. Getting people to finally slow down, getting people to finally face inward, getting people to finally ask fundamental questions about who they are inevitably, and the nature of what their life as in consciousness is, which is so valuable. But before we go there, I've often thought too that I think the sort of singularity with all of this complexity could eventually be the snake eating its own tail, in the form of, now you're taken care of by entities that are autonomous, and you're still going to hit that so what point of having to sense make your life. So like at a certain point, the AI, the infinite complexity, I imagine, will eventually walk you into a corner where you have nothing to do but finally ask those fundamental questions, or finally face inward, or finally individuate, or start meditating, or whatever the fuck it is in your pure personal permutation. Because I think at a certain point, we're just going to get tired of it, man. We're going to get tired of all the content. We're going to get tired of all the noise. We're going to at least a large percentage of us will. There's some
I
people who
would
I think
think
will just,
so,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
also don't think so, man. I mean,
Don't you, do
sadly,
you,
if you look, well, look
don't
how it
you
is
get
now.
tired now of it?
Yes, but most people are satisfied with like, I'll just take another Monday night football game, the next movie that's coming out, I'll go out to Applebee's or whatever. It's like those rewards are enough. It's sort of like placate the masses in a sense. Like I think the bigger problem is like if our ecological crisis continues, none of that'll matter anyway, because the world becomes less and less habitable for even just the economics of our world to work. And on top of that, the disparity of wealth, if that continues to expand, which it has been since
Haven't you
2008, it
heard that
did
that's
not.
all made up too now? There is no
Yeah, right.
ecological
It's like you're
crisis. It's
not
all just,
actually not as
you can
wealthy.
just,
Like,
you can actually
billionaires
just
don't
dump, you
exist.
can actually just dump as much garbage into the water as you want, and it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, we're going to invent our way out of it. We'll clean it, or we'll suck all the carbon out of the atmosphere, or we'll dump oil back in the ground, as Duncan said. It's like, uh, it's it.
Sorry, I'm just going to interject one thing real quick. I saw such
Yes,
a
please.
stupid post recently about how it was something to do with the ocean levels or temperature or whatever
Stupid.
had been this much higher only this many thousand years ago. Explain that, climate changers or whatever. And it's
Yeah,
like,
right.
just because something happened naturally in the past, it doesn't nullify everything we're doing now. Like, it doesn't mean that what we're doing now also doesn't have an impact. Like, the inability for people to hold two different ideas in their head at once that doesn't fit like a political narrative or a philosophical narrative is like unbelievable to me. Like the how attached people are to their reality tunnels, where it's just like they're constantly cherry picking little pieces of evidence to fit within a very narrow interpretation of what reality is, or what something as massive as what the planet is doing. Like, or it's wild to me. It's
Yeah,
wild.
and the iPhone and social media, the ability to spread information is what probably started. That's when the shift really started to accelerate in a negative way as far as polarization of ideas. And I've been reading a lot lately. I'm hoping to talk to Daniel Pinchbeck on my podcast soon. And he's someone I've known since 2008, and we've had an interesting relationship, like personally. But his ideas, I often resonate with them. And lately, he had this thing about like galaxy brain people.
Mm,
Okay, we're a little bit guilty of this, where it's just like we get online and we'll just talk about anything.
yeah,
And there's a lot of people out there who really don't have any expertise in a lot of these things, yet they have a lot of influence. And they have these galaxy brands where it's like, well, whatever we want, just, oh, I got an
yeah,
opinion
yeah,
on that. Sure, I'll make an opinion on that. And like,
yeah,
and that's not helping us. That we've sort of given up on expertise. And a matter of fact, we've almost said like, oh, expertise. Well, that's been co-opted or it's dangerous. It's like I don't even know who to trust anymore. And there is
right.
some truth to that. It's like some of it has been co-opted, but it doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it becomes into this malaise of like nothing's very specific, but the opinions are very clear and strong
Yeah,
and more demarcated into certain camps.
yeah. Yeah, I'm totally guilty of that, but I will say that I form opinions, obviously, but typically when I'm in conversations like this in a public facing way, it's not overly dependent on an opinion. I truly am content to just explore and talk around things without solidifying into an opinion. And I mean, that's not the case always, but I think that being comfortable in that gray area is just, that's like, that's the ultimate philosophical workout. Like, that's essentially, you're almost doing the Socratic method in your own mind, where instead of like you're forcing yourself to look at it from multiple perspectives, you're forced to consider the, steel manning the other side and really trying to consider the strengths and weaknesses of an argument on their own merits. And I'm not saying I can do this 100% of the time, but I think that alone is a very, very important distinction to try to make in a conversation. Like if you're
And
talking to someone
it's
and you're like, does
laudable.
this person want to get to truth, or do they really just want to prove their own agenda point? Because if you're in a conversation where somebody is doing the latter, you might as well just disengage from that conversation, because it's not going to go anywhere. And
And
you know,
and and what is the most popular stuff online? it's definitely the opinionated stuff.
Yeah.
For whether it's Jordan Peterson or, I mean, Joe Rogan is a guy with opinions. And he's not
Yeah.
a Bill Maher. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, that's the stuff for some reason that actually clicks the most and gets you elevated the most.
Yeah.
There's something about human psychology where it might be healthier for us to ask more questions and stay in that middle ground. Like, I tend to do that too, but I've nowhere near the platform of these other people because I don't want to make that switch cravenly to say like, and to be honest, I'm also somewhat afraid of like, sometimes
True.
I hold back on certain opinions because I'm like,
Same.
we're in this, you don't want to get the woke mob or any mob, frankly,
Right.
anybody, even one person has a
Right.
lot of power. And then you start to just sort of like catch yourself as like, why? I don't know if I should express that opinion that truthfully, because also I don't have the same chutzpah to say like, I really know. I don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of these things. I don't have as strong opinions about some of these
Yeah.
things because I'm in that place of ambiguity where I'm like, and there's not really much of a world for that anymore. Where you
No.
can be like, oh, well, I actually like the alien thing is a perfect example. Perfect example. Of course, I don't know what's going on. I actually kind of feel a lot of the sides have some bits of truth. It's possible. I don't fully trust the government's going to just have our best interests and tell us the truth.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think like it's possible some people in the government, many have no idea what's going on. And maybe a couple do who are
Right.
like kind of in the government. And it's possible even Stephen Greer. There's elements of that that are true. And a lot of it's just lost in his own delusion. And all of that can be true. And that is a very difficult truth to hold. That
Yeah.
it's like we actually all have bits of this key to the lock. And
Right.
unfortunately, they may never come together perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to, I think, start magnifying the middle a little more because the fringes magnify themselves, right? Because it's either going to take everyone else on the fringes who thinks in a similar way and they're going to congregate together, or it's going to make the other side angry, so they're going to congregate together, and you get that on both sides. And there's very little magnification of the middle and uncertainty and gray area in the way that we're talking about. But I think it is not only the most intellectually honest, it's the only position that continues to get more interesting and deepen ad infinitum, forever and ever and ever. Like if you're committed to the mystery, there's no end to it. Like you said before, you hit the ground floor on the like, and I've done the same thing, man. In the hyper new age spiritual dimension, where you finally go to one of these gatherings and everyone's a Pleiadian and everyone's talking about what alien race they're related to, and everyone's wearing it's like crystal peacocking, like literally, like just bigger and bigger
Crystal
crystals,
Peacock.
and and you'll eventually hit that kind of a wall where either you're like, I'm into this, or it becomes like, whoa, this is beyond the pale to me. This is a lot of people grasping at straws looking for something, whatever. You'll find a conclusion. But if you're more committed to the mystery and you just keep following the mystery, it never ends. It never ends. Like I just did on a totally unrelated note. I just finished a video on James Hillman's view of dreams and working with dreams. And he goes to the furthest extreme in terms of, just to nutshell it quickly, what if dreams are not ours? What if they're not something to be translated into something that makes sense for our daily life? What if they are emanations of psyche at large and we're receiving those images and we're trying to turn those images into something about our ego, and that's really not what they're for at all? And what if there really is this cosmos of psyche? And what if there really are archetypes in that cosmos? And yes, we're receiving images from them, but maybe they're not just to be made into something about your love life or your job or your friend or whatever. Maybe those are just, in the dream realm, those characters are just masks of the infinite. And you're in there looking at the mask and thinking, oh, this is telling me something about my brother. It's like, no, this is telling you something archetypal. And that is that little switch right there is like either trying to solve or go deeper into mystery. And I think for me, always, like when I feel that impulse to solve, I'm like, that's me grasping. That's my ego's desire to know. That's me not wanting to die. That's me hoping there's a way out of this thing I'm afraid of. That's my shadow wriggling because I don't want to be old or I don't want to be uglier than this person. You know, as soon as you make that shift and you're like willing to go deeper into not knowing, I think you paradoxically somehow know more, you know?
It's very Tao, and absolutely. And with dreams, I don't know. It's probably the middle again. Like, what if it's
Yeah.
both?
Yeah.
And I don't think Ram Dass would talk about like, look, a lot of it's gobbledygook. Like, you shouldn't read into it. It's just literally the brain working shit out. But there's a dimensional space where perhaps these archetypical ideas or energies or beings can break through into that medium to provide messages. And because I think what confounds us is when we have those experiences, let's say with dreams in particular, where you have a dream that actually is a premonition or something so powerful, it's so different than all your other dreams. It's difficult as a sense making experience. What
Right.
was that? What do I do with that? And those things have happened. I think I just read about one. I don't know if it's true. I love that phrase. I don't know if this is true, but it was Einstein, a dream Einstein had, a premonition. I think about, gosh, was it his brother's death? The weird thing
Yeah.
is, I might have dreamt that last night, or I actually read
Ooh,
that.
even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I think you're right, but it's like perhaps it's all of the above.
Yeah. That is where I typically land on things is trying to go for the both and dreaming is definitely one of those areas. And I so badly wish I could talk to Hillman. I so badly wish he was alive because he'll often make a point with like a haymaker when really his true feelings are kind of more like a jab. You know, he'll say, there's a really great lecture series of his you can find probably on YouTube, and you can also download on Audible called A Blue Fire. And it's him giving a lecture on all these different topics to a very active audience who I think most of them are also psychologists and therapists of a Jungian persuasion. So they're all very into these ideas. And he'll stop sometimes and be like, I want you to understand something. When I'm making a point, I want to go all the way with it. I want to leave wreckage behind me. I want to be irresponsible because if those things are actually true, they'll be just fine. But I'm trying to get my point across, and I'm not trying to, necessarily tiptoe around it or use all of this nuance because I really want you to get in the full headspace of this idea, and then maybe that will move the needle a little bit. And I also, that there's a problem with that for sure, with that way of thinking, because anybody could use that defense, right? Like, oh, I'm not really racist, but I just use racist. You could just you could do things like that. But I like his point when it comes to trying to discuss some of these more esoteric psychological ideas because it really forces you to occupy that headspace and be like, is there something to this? Is he right? But ultimately, I think where I settle is I consider those things and then I drift backward a little bit. And I go just like what you were describing, where yeah, I think Freud was kind of right in terms of it's just interpretive and it's the brain working things out. And yeah, there's mythological, archetypal material in there, but it's probably not evidence of an ontologically real collective unconscious. And then you can go the next step toward Jung and be like, no, maybe it is both. And maybe they're meeting on a bridge of the conscious and the unconscious. Or you can go all the way over to the Hillman side. And like I said, it's all the noumena. It's the noumena coming into your little container wearing different masks. And I think it's very important to consider all three deeply and really try to take them all seriously equally. Um, but anyway, I wasn't even trying to go deep into the realm of dreams, but it is an interesting example because it is one of those a chapel perilous example of like this is all happening in your mind, and it could all be nonsense, or it could all be meaningful, or it could be a mixture of the two, and you have to constantly juggle all those balls.
Well, that's where we seem to be the most unstable, is in the unseen.
Yeah,
And it like I want to keep returning to the alien thing as sort of maybe our backbone, because it's
please do.
another like, similar situation where it's all focused on what we can see, quite literally. what have we seen? It's investing now, what do we have evidence? A radar. There it is. What have you seen? And it's interesting that they talk about how they appear and then disappear, or how they can go
Yeah.
underwater or come
Hmm.
out of mountains and shoot into space. So there seems to be this dimensional aspect to it where it's not even so much about form. Form is part of it, but they can change form and work with physics in ways we can't, that are impossible. So in a lot of ways, it seems to have to do with the unidentified, UAP, or is in a sense like unseen aerial phenomenon. It's like the aspect about feeling, the aspect about the somatic, the aspect of about things that are not, you can't put your finger on. And in many ways, that seems to be what we're struggling with as a people, that I struggle with. Many of us do. The hardest things are the things we can't prove, that I can't touch, that I can't get direct evidence on, because it's completely confounding to our entire system that wants to say, I can control that, I can identify it, I can catalog it, I can put it in a box. And all the
Hmm.
things that are emerging now, in many ways, even AI, like, or the internet itself, it's like the things that they create collectively are in a sense unseen. We can make maps of it, but what is the effect of us being connected with the internet? What is the effect of AI having billions of AI disparate forms? What does it create? And we struggle with this because we don't, the tools we have to use become more intuitive, interpretive, uh, squishy, and weird.
Yeah. Um, I used to be very open to the Jungian interpretation of UFOs, in that they really were kind of like ephemeral projections of consciousness, or like the
Mm.
collective unconscious maybe, and that they were more psychical than material. But then when you get into this realm of supposedly we've recovered craft and supposedly we've recovered bodies and stuff, that in a way nullifies that argument. But while you were saying this, I had a crazy idea that I'm going to try to mouth noise for the first time. And what if when you reach a certain level of, to just, I'm going to immediately shoot this down by using the worst word, but you reach a certain level of consciousness, and that level of consciousness actually dictates physicality is not necessary anymore. So
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
my point with saying that is, what if whatever is manifesting in physical space is actually a momentary shard of whatever the true consciousness is? And yeah, maybe we have captured craft, but what if that's only, I guess the way to say this in a nutshell is, what if that is the true nature of this phenomenon, that it actually is more psychical and more immaterial, and that it has the ability to phase briefly into the physical, but that's not really, you're just seeing a very low level slice of whatever it actually is. Like, perhaps it, like, that's an idea that breaks our brain, because, or breaks my brain to think, yeah, I maybe, maybe we can in some altered state go into this elevated level of consciousness where we gain access to more reality, more psyche, more
Psychedelics.
perception, right, or anything, right, that can get you there. But what if there's like a realm where the opposite is true, that you actually have to go, your true nature is to be in that realm, but you have to sort of like squish part of your psyche or a piece of your psyche down into the material to physically affect something on this realm or something. That's hard. Like, that is, maybe that's not, doesn't sound profound, but to me that felt like a profound, like, whoa, I don't know if I've ever thought about it quite that way before. But I guess it kind of just sounds like something divine creating an avatar for itself,
Well,
or
it
something
could
like
be
that.
the other way, that we're phasing into their, like, we're pushing our
Ooh.
noses and eyeballs just above the surface. There's some kind of
Ooh.
phase shift on our side. Well,
Yes, that's
it's
true.
probably more that we have more cameras and stuff now, so that's why there's more evidence. But it could be that there's or in between all that, the Earth and whatever, go back to like 2012 kind of stuff. We're in this galactic arm, this flocculent arm of our Milky Way that's spiraling in itself, right? The arm of the galaxy is moving, but this you understand what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the fat that thing is turning. So we're in that, and that was supposed to be what the Bach tune was in a sense. Like you're sort of crossing the meridian line, and so there's a different kind of gamma or wave coming out of this massive black
Mm-hmm.
hole, and just that is a physical thing, but that creates some kind of maybe shift on our planet. That and so there's
Yeah.
actually an actual shift happening in whatever the physics are of our
Yeah.
space. But
Yeah. The
try this
idea that
wrinkle
we
on
could.
for size.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Try this on. So it's like, wouldn't it somewhat make sense that if you develop as a species and you were getting close to being able to get off planet in significant ways, in maybe more likely than not, you don't make it there because you destroy yourself like we are.
Yeah.
Like, and you have to break through that. It's like sort of this inevitable process of like cooperation as an entire world technologically. You don't destroy yourselves in order to become. Now we can go into step 2, almost like Star Trek idea. Like you've gotten over wars, you don't do that anymore, and now you found out about warp drive in a sense. And if that's the case, then perhaps alien species that are coming through would be more benevolent. Like, because the idea is like, well, if they've been coming here, why are they just kind of hiding and stuff, or why are they not influencing us, or are they negatively? And I'm thinking, well, maybe the only reason they're able to be here is because they've gotten beyond that. Because look at what happened to us, or if you believe in Atlantis or stuff, it's like maybe it's like they didn't make it
Mm-hmm.
and started over. Now here we are, and it's like, are we going? And that's the big
Yeah.
experiment. That's the galactic welcoming. Is like, will you make it through this threshold of not destroying yourselves and finding out what sustainability is through cooperation with
Yeah.
your Earth, with each other, and making technology that is sustainable, not just about short-term gains. And if you do, that will
Yeah.
presage you into an age where it can now go on for millions of years. And the last thing I'll throw in here is like, space is a dangerous place. If you had AI and all this technology, maybe you would develop essentially avatars, little grays that are emotionless beings. I mean, that's not really you. That's your avatar that you're embodying, so you feel like you're there, but you're safely on your planet. And you just send out essentially these extremely sophisticated biological probes so that you're not at risk.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to crawl your own way out of the initiatory crucible. And if you do,
Maybe
then you
that's what we're
get
doing.
that. Yeah, that sounds like something McKenna would have said. Crawl your way out of the initiatory crucible. You've got to do
There,
it yourself.
there's a casuistry amidst, that's so we're
Yeah, I do. I think the sort of zoo theory hypothesis is it feels more and more plausible to me. Like the idea of here's a great example of how aliens are just the tip of a devastating sense-making iceberg, right? Because right now, ancient aliens is a fringe idea.
wow.
As soon as aliens exist, how does that not become a highly plausible idea? If hyper intelligent aliens, hyper advanced aliens are in fact visiting us, the idea that what does that tell us? They're taking an interest. Therefore, okay, well, how long have they been taking an interest? What level of interest have they been taking? What does that interest look like? Do they interfere? How do they interfere? Why do they conceal themselves? Do they, rig elementally or in terms of weather or in terms of cosmic happenstance in the solar system to try to encourage growth, or do they directly come down on the earth in human suits? And like it is a devastating sense making just
Yeah, it never ends. It goes on and on.
geyser of
Yeah.
possibilities, and that is a mind fuck. But you know what else is interesting that I don't hear anyone doing is, what if what we're seeing right now is them trying their hardest to reveal themselves? What if they're not super advanced? What if their nature is just very, very different than ours, and they're trying super hard to reveal themselves to us, but they're just not very adept at like building whatever they need to build or crossing the threshold to get into our realm? And maybe what if they like don't even have language and they're just like blubbering, like one
Yeah,
very kind, like deep intelligence in one technical area, but no, culture or
very
something
bad
like that.
social skills.
Yeah,
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 it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
well, that movie Arrival, that was a
Hmm.
great one about where it's just that literally how do we communicate, uh,
Yeah.
creating a linguistics, and
Yeah, and
sort
what
of
is your
breaking through.
appetite for and what is your appetite for something different than you that is
Hmm.
inherently aesthetically very off-putting and ugly and scary
Hmm.
looking, and that there's so many big, yeah, so much in there.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, but it seems to be the phenomenon that is among us is largely been what's being talked about is sort of like essentially objects, ships, whatever, things that move in ways we can't quite understand, and they're somewhat small, and for the most part, there's almost a sense like some of them have been caught, like, oh, that just passed by, like they're like, oh shit, or there's an element of playfulness, like they're like you said, revealing, like why are they tracking us, or they've been flying with us for 3 minutes, or you hear stories about the ones that went over some nuclear
Right.
facilities and turned them off.
Hmm.
Like, well, that's a pretty bold move.
Yeah.
That's not subtle. Or there was some tests going on with not actual nuclear weapons, but like the rockets, and then them getting destroyed. Again, I don't know if that's true. It's
I,
just
I
things
think
that
it's
have been
been pretty
reported.
well I think it's been pretty well corroborated by actual people in the military
Right.
and stuff. Yeah.
And that's a bigger deal to me than like we caught one on a radar and look at how it's moving. It's like that
Right.
is amazing. You have some radar evidence, but like, I mean, goodness gracious, if it turns off your nuclear weapon systems, it seems like some kind of mess. That's a level of power that also you can't reckon with. You can
Yeah.
understand the story why they'd be like, let's bury this because we are not in control of any of
Yeah.
this, and the public might think we're not in control, and chaos ensues, kind of thing. And I'm just like, chaos hasn't been ensuing from the simplest things, like, and that's why now maybe some of it's coming out because like it's lost in the madness in a way, or it's can't be held back, or it's needed in a certain way.
Yeah.
Like that concrescence that McKenna would talk about. Like it definitely feels we're on this exponential upswing to something.
Yeah.
And how soon is that, or is it, but it seems like many things are coming to a head.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely feels like we're headed toward another Promethean moment. And I think there's been I think we've already lived through moments that felt Promethean, but I think it's going to get to a point where it feels utterly Promethean. Like if we so for instance, the continued merging of the digital and the artificial to the biological and, whatever this our own quote unquote mind is,
Yeah,
that's a level of Promethean shift that reality is not the same anymore. Once that happens, reality is not the same anymore because your mind is not just your own mind anymore. Your thoughts are not just your own thoughts anymore. You can't even be sure of that now, and you'll be even less sure of it once that happens. Once you have foreign information literally traversing your synapses, like,
it's
what does
kind of
that
happening
mean?
though,
What does it mean?
right? I
It
mean,
is happening indirectly. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, once you're literally like, there's electricity going
right.
into your brain, like that's a level of
It's
like, I
happening
don't,
right now
yeah.
with someone putting an AirPod in their ears and listening to your voice in their head.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like,
yeah. Don't do it. Whatever it is, don't do it. Don't do it, guys.
it's just, I don't know, man.
Unless
It's a
it's the other
level of
thing, then do it.
the level of information is just astounding. I'm reaching a breaking point where,
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of what I do is for my own soothing, but that started in 2008, and it felt like it made more sense for, I don't know, up until a couple years ago. This post-COVIDian space we're in is far stranger and complex than I think we're letting on. We're still
yeah,
holding on to the story of like, hey guys, we're back to normal. Let's just not talk about it. And it's like, does this feel normal to you? Is like, does anyone else, does this feel more intense than before? Like more intense,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and less stable. And that's my subjective experience of just trying to navigate. I, I'm struggling in that way, and I don't have
Totally.
the answer for like, but it does seem to have something to do with less. And
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
that is the
Exactly what I was
opposite
thinking.
narrative of what we're told. We're still pushing the story that, like, the economy of scale. It's all about the economy of scale, whether it's
Yeah.
our economy literally growing, or it's about how many followers you have, or like trying to make more money. Money is security, but it just doesn't feel as
Yeah.
true.
Wouldn't it be great if you could go platinum in quality, not quantity? Bro, this guy's, he might not be platinum in quantity, but this guy's quadruple platinum in
Yeah,
quality. Did I say, I might have said quality two times? I don't even know what I said, but you know what I
point
meant.
taken. Point
Um,
taken.
yeah, but to me, honestly, man, I would, if that were a thing, I would absolutely strive for that because I think all of us have always known that, yeah, of course we want the numbers. Of course, we're like, you and I are both, whether we like it or not, just by doing something creative. The goal is number go up, right? If
Well, and
number
it's
not,
tied to
yeah,
the same economy. That's how
hmm,
you pay your rent and so forth.
right, yeah.
So
But yeah, man, think about like that. If you could somehow make a qualitative shift, and I don't know, actually, AI probably
I knew
could
you were going to say
make
this.
that
I knew it could
distinction.
be,
Let's
and
steel
it
man
could be
AI
true,
because
which is even more fucked up. Like,
if AI starts looking at, hey, is this person leveraging controversy? Is this person using low hanging fruit to appeal to people's lesser nature? Is this person doing all of these things to make number go up? Then their quality rating goes down. But are these other people doing a net positive on society? Like clearly you are. Clearly like you're taking people to this very deep introspective healing cathartic place with your music, with your gatherings. So your quality rating in my algorithm would go up. Like
but
imagine if we could
that's
build
the thing.
quality into, yeah,
It's
yeah,
your algorithm. Like, I mean,
that's
we
right.
have to write that algorithm. And I had a friend. This is, gosh, more than 15 years ago. He was applying to work at Google DeepMind.
Oh
So
wow.
the experimental arm, and they were working on AI stuff. And back then, it wasn't much of a public thing. And he told me in the interview process, he got the job,
Oh wow.
that they asked him, "What do you think we should teach AI or program essentially?" And he said, this came to him, he said, in an ayahuasca journey, which is this is what gets even stranger. And he told them, "I was like, I think we need to teach it how to love,
Hmm.
because we have to teach it that, and then we'll start to do like what you're saying." But I question whether we have the capabilities, human beings, to put aside our short-term financial interest or power
Yeah.
interest to say, let's program it to do about, um, how something makes you, feel, or is there a net benefit? Because we're not doing that with AI, with social media, for instance, or even in the development of AI itself. Supposedly, if you believe that the people who are doing this and say this is an existential threat for us, if that's true, but they're also not stopping, because they're like, we're in an arms race with other countries and other companies, and we can't lose. So it's like right there, we're
Right.
sort
Right.
of like,
Right.
we can change it, but we choose not to, because we're
Right.
saying no, the other guy or other gal won't.
Right. Yeah. Where do you fall on that? Like, have you gathered? Do you think the requisite information to form an opinion on that
Oh, I'll
question
galaxy
of,
brain the shit out of this. Yeah,
let's
no, I mean,
galaxy brain it, let's bro science it, let's galaxy brain it, let's do what we do. Um, so yeah, specifically the question of AI. Does it, the notion of it being an existential threat, does that?
yeah. I just put a little, my opinion is just a little bit of a twist. I don't think it's like Terminator style, where it's like the AI itself takes over the military and it is killing us. I think it is handing us the axe to kill ourselves. And I say that because
Hmm.
it's already the case. So fairly, let's say, unsophisticated at this point, AI algorithms are picking up what you see on YouTube or even your Google searches, or certainly on social media. That has increased the polarization. That has created actual, inability for government to function as even a little bit better than it did before, and we are killing each other by
Mm-hmm.
indecision, whether it's around climate initiatives or anything that we could have collective agreement on. COVID was a perfect example. Perfect leveling event where it's like this will affect every human being, no matter how rich or poor or where you are on the planet or where you live. You would think now we can unify around something, and we didn't. And why? Largely because the information we were ingesting about it was corrupted, and we corrupted our minds, and we willingly allowed it to happen. We knew that these programs were running and changing the way we think. We have evidence against this. We see what's happening, and they're making a ton of money, and they have
Yeah.
too much power, and it is not stopping. Even though people now are fairly aware of it, and they're fully addicted. Addicted meaning they can't stop. So that is AI shifting human behavior. So just turn that up by a million X,
Yeah.
not just on social media. That'd be a part of it. Like if you don't even know it's true anymore, like it's hard to know now. Imagine if you really can't find out anymore, even like medical facts
Yeah.
or basic history, because there's just like anything could have infinite fake articles about it, or even taking real articles
Mm-hmm.
and creating any argument you want.
Yeah.
That is a strange world to live in. It's just like what we live in, but more. And I would think if we increase the polarization and you add on top of that a climate that's collapsing, and you add on top of that the rich are getting richer and the disparity of wealth, we know from past history, at least with the wealth part, just that people revolt. It's a matter of time. I mean, it happened in 2008. We just put our fingers in the dam and we moved on, but we did not change the system. The system has
Right.
only increased the financial, the debt ratio and so forth. So in that way, I think AI is an existential threat if we don't change the way we use it or program it,
Yeah.
because we'll just do what we've been doing, but far, far, far more. Especially even now, where they're like, I'm not quite sure how it works. You hear certain engineers say that because when we started having them all talk together, and we don't quite know. Well, that seems pretty wild if it's out there in the public and it's inside a capitalistic, profit-driven growth
Right.
system.
Right. Yeah. All really good points and a good nuanced take. Um, something I want to look into, because I feel like this already must be a notion, like in terms of being a known philosophical thought experiment or something, or maybe even like an equation. But what does it mean when there's a agent or technology that has an infinite capacity for good, but it also only requires one or very, very few bad actors to completely wipe out, either wipe everyone out or do massive, massive damage to civilization? And what do you how do you morally navigate that? Because I think that's what we're approaching is you have a technology that seems like it might be able to wipe out diseases, that might be able to
Or
really
create new diseases, right? That's like you're
right,
saying.
right.
It'd be very
Yeah, yeah,
easy then
yeah.
to
Yeah, where let's say 99% of people use it for a net neutral or positive or just maybe a little negative. That's not really hurting anyone except themselves.
just a
But
little
then
fun. Yeah.
but then 0.01% of people, what if all they would need to do is get the jailbroken, version of the full-blown chat GPT 4 or whatever it is, which I understand you can already do if you know how to like run it on your own server and shit. And they're using it for nefarious purposes,
Mm.
and they're doing it purposefully. Like there has to be a tipping point, right? Because just imagine any technology that has infinite capacity for good, but it only takes a tiny, tiny micro percentage of people to do irreparable harm. At what point do you say no to that technology? And not that I'm saying we should say no, or that I think we even could say no. I think it's like the ship has sailed. But
That's the point. Like, I don't know if we
that,
can. I don't know if
yeah,
there is even
yeah,
a choice. Yeah.
yeah, we're so deep into it already. I literally use AI almost every day in my creative output at this point. Like I use Midjourney all the time. I use ChatGPT fairly often, and it's so helpful, man, to bring creative visions to life and do thing and not have to steal other people's art directly. And then what's funny is you still get accused of stealing people's art because you're using an AI art
You're
generator that's
stealing
been
billions
trained.
of pieces of art. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that's a whole different conversation that I've had very many times. But and it's funny because literally, basically, someone in the same comment was like, "I love this video so much, but you stole a bunch of people's art by using AI. You should have just used actual human beings' art." It's like, so I should have just stolen actual human beings' art, and then like you basically told me it's you love it, you're mad at me, don't steal art, but then steal art, like all in the same comment. But anyway,
Yeah.
we're
Maybe we don't have a choice. Well, I
no,
don't.
we don't.
We don't.
I think
It's
there has to be some level of choice that matters. I think, but we don't. I don't think we have a choice in terms of like we're living the Pandora's box. We're living the Promethean myth. Like this is a great opportunity for mythopoetic reflection. Is it's like there are these things you don't go back from. Once something happens, you don't go back from it. And AI is one of those things we're not going back from. There's too many factors, too many things in motion. Um, it's silly to think about trying to put it back in the box at this point. Um, but how much it worries me, the jury is out for me on how much
hmm
I feel like I should be worried. The one thing that does genuinely give me concern is there was a paper that was published around the time ChatGPT version 4 came out, where these engineers were using the full unlocked version of it, and they were identifying all these epiphenomenal things that it was learning
Wow.
how to do that it was not programmed to do. And I don't remember what they were off the top of my head, but it was like, that is crazy. And if it's gaining these epiphenomenal abilities, I know one example I heard was like a language it shouldn't have known. It figured out.
Whoa.
Like it figured out it was some Indian language. And I think they covered this on that 60 Minutes piece if anybody saw
hmm
that. I think they briefly mentioned that, like, yeah, we did not give it the necessary information to know whatever dialect of
Look,
Indian, and it
man.
figured it
There's
out.
two
Bengali, it was
factors.
Bengali.
I think largely in the conversation I'm finding, people are too focused on the current state of AI. It's like
Yeah.
you have to take into account that it can be exponentially learning. I mean, it doesn't matter what it's doing essentially right now. It's like that will be such a moot point once it learns this and then learns that. And then it can get rapidly. There will be a point where it crosses past like human beings. It already probably has, but as far, I mean, and then can then race off. And
Yeah.
another thing we're not talking about much is quantum computing,
Yeah, right.
which
Yeah.
is a real thing that's getting close. The qubits are coming into place. And again,
Mhm.
every country is on this, and every major company, IBM and so forth, are working on this.
Yeah.
You put that with AI, I don't even know what that means. All I can think is like the
Yeah.
ability to compute, because some people have said, oh, we don't have the computing power anyway for this to really take off. And I'm like, I hear that. But it's also like, what if that increased exponentially as well?
Right.
Eh,
Yeah.
which is on the line. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I remember seeing it was a public facing thing that Google released maybe like 2 years ago. They built a whole specific building and team for quantum
yeah,
computing. And they were talking about the things that are possible with quantum computing, and it's mind blowing. It's to your point, it's like we don't it's like saying, what's possible, 48 trillion quadrillion. Like you might as well just say that because we
yeah,
can't visualize it. And that's what they're
yeah,
saying. And
yeah.
what's remarkable is that we have figured out how to parlay extraordinarily limited human intelligence into superior forms of intelligence that even we don't understand. Like the fact that we have somehow put that fire in a box that you can push a button on, close the lid, and then have this thing unfold like a fractal of intelligence. And then at a certain point, we don't even know what's going on in the box anymore.
It is
Like,
remarkable, isn't
that
it?
is
I
just,
mean,
it's so crazy.
and we built it. I
Yeah.
mean, there's something to be proud of there. you've seen like maps of the internet ever?
I don't
It's
know.
more like a diagram.
Okay.
It looks like a mycelial
Of course.
uh, sphere because it's
Yeah.
around the Earth, and then you also look at a neuron. They all three look almost the same. It's a random thought, but I mean, it's hard not to step back and be like, sort of the Marshall McLuhan idea that we're the sex organ of the machines.
Right.
That like,
Yeah.
I mean, if you really step back, like, what are we doing? It's so incredible. We've literally put fiber optic tubes all over the planet to
Right.
connect
Yeah.
ourselves. I mean, there actually are tubes, and it's satellites too. But the point is, we have built something that we don't even now understand what it
Right.
is or where it's going, and yet we continue to build it. It's remarkable because we see applications, but even though we recognize fully there are many, many more applications that it may do on its own that we don't even know what they are.
Totally. Yeah, this is yet another interesting piece of circumstantial evidence and inductive reasoning that almost seems like it goes back to some kind of alien hyperintelligence. In that, like, we think we all have free will, we're all like running around doing whatever we want. But if you look at what's going on over a zoomed out enough perspective, we're clearly doing something that we're not even conscious
Yeah.
of, that we don't, no one, everyone thinks they're having their own idea to contribute to it in whatever way they're contributing. But if you zoomed out, it wouldn't look like there's a choice. It would look like an anthill being built. It would look like a honey,
Yeah, dude.
like a
You
honeycomb
just hit
being,
on like my fundamental existential crisis. Like my
yeah,
entire world and working worldview, both personally and professionally, is under the assumption we have free will. And I really want to believe we do.
yeah,
And I do believe we do, like to my core, but I also recognize I can look at evidence about determinism that is real. And so then I have to go back to the middle and say, well, it's clearly at a minimum both,
yeah.
clearly. And, but then you start stepping into the mystery itself. It's like, well, that's where things break down. It's like,
Hmm.
what if it's both? What if we have destiny and choice at the same time?
Yeah.
And what does that even mean? It's like,
Yeah.
well, now we understand why we have Buddha, we have koans and we have like Rumi and like we
Hmm.
have art because it's like you just crossed over to where it's like it is unanswerable. It is the mystery itself. And
Yeah.
that's kind of a cop out because that's me saying like, oh, you can't answer it. But I also, my heart tells me, and psychedelic experiences have told me, like, unfortunately, for better or worse, that's the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I totally think it's possible to have a limited determinism and limited indeterminism. Like, again, this is one of those things where it's either this or it's that. And there's no good reason that I think it has to be. And it's funny because my stance on determinism totally depends on what's doing the determining. If it's just mindless physics and I have no choice because that's just how the molecules in my body and my cells and everything are being guided by the laws of physics, and the that I don't understand or whatever, then I don't like it. If there's some kind of higher intelligence steering the
Ah.
wheel, or higher intelligence is steering the wheels using us like puppets, kind of into it.
Yeah, it can't
Kind of
just be
into it.
your gut biome. That's like,
Yeah.
that's not cool.
Yeah, right. No, not at all. That's not
It's the
sexy.
yogurt I ate and now
Yeah.
it's controlling my brain.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which brand of yogurt do I need to buy to increase my free will? That's
Ex-
that's a new um but yeah, man, I think my favorite mythological way to talk about this is the whole daimon rap. I'm sure we've at least
We
glanced
did
up
talk
on
about
this.
this before, yeah.
Yeah, but the notion that, and it also, this goes back to karma, this goes back to like different laws of, in air quotes, like metaphysical laws of cause and effect, that we're simultaneously the victims of, but also participating in. Like whether you're looking at it from a karmic perspective or a ancient Greek perspective or whatever, they all hold these ideas that we do have some level of free will, but we're also in some kind of crucible. Like we're undergoing some kind of like higher
Mm.
cosmic process or initiation that we don't understand, and it's going to take like many, many iterations to move on from or change or become conscious of or whatever. And the Greek version of it is that when you incarnate, you the fates essentially weave this pattern. That pattern is your soul, or your yeah, it's your individual paradigma, they call it. So this mandala that represents you somehow, and within that pattern you can do all kinds of things. It's like, I think of it like open world RPG with, this is the character that I get, and then the daimon is like the keeper of the pattern. Like you as Krishna, East Forest, me as Michael, our memory is wiped due to necessity of that happens, that's outlined in this myth. But the daimon remembers, and you selected the daimon before incarnating to sort of like guide you in the form of a conscience, in the form of intuition, in the form of
Yeah.
whatever. And to me, that's an interesting midway, because it's like you are in control to an extent, but there's also many factors in how we have manifested here that are totally out of our control. So I think you could take either one of those and run with it to a point of ultimate determinism or free will. But again, I don't feel the need to do that. I'm just like, I like this. I like this way of looking at it, and it feels right to either my intuition or my bias, or a bit of both.
And we do this as a way of sense making when you think about
Yeah.
religion, or ways to just, grasp the existential abyss that is in front of us. I happen to identify with that very similar worldview or life view. And I remember there was a book called Journey of Souls, and it's a hypnotherapist, Michael Newton. I don't know if you ever came
Hmm.
across that book,
No.
but it's the same viewpoint, just with a different like framework a bit. But it's more like one of the reasons I liked it. It kind of had that idea that like you're kind of choosing a lot of this before you incarnate, and you've done this many times before. But there was nothing in the book that really keyed me off. I was like, oh man, does it have to be like that? Or that doesn't make sense to me, because I had to remember like hypnosis is coming through the filter of your brain. So
Mm-hmm.
I put you in a hypnotic state. It's literally having to work through your brain and the language you are able to speak and your memories. And so in a sense it's metaphor, but it's also going through a filter. And that's why I wouldn't expect someone to go in hypnosis and they can speak some language they don't know, or like some alien can come. They're like, well, it has to go through this filter of Michael. And he would put people into these deep hypnotic states. It's kind of a state he developed that was a little, let's just call it even deeper. And he was trying to work on something else, but people started talking about kind of like life between life. And at first he's like, that's
Mm.
odd, but it kept happening. And they kept saying the same things. And that's how this all
Wow.
started for him. He's like, I wasn't in any of this field, but it just kept happening. So he started recording them and tracking them. And here's my book of like basically people saying things in that state that they've allowed me to reproduce what they said in those stations. And there's just this commonality of the message over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with that. And there's these boundary conditions they would hit where he'd ask a certain question. They essentially couldn't quite answer it,
Mm.
because it's not able to be answered in just like English in a way. It's like, I
Yeah.
can't answer that, or you wouldn't understand, or it's not explainable, or, it's like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and it has to do with these contradictions of choice and destiny, or we do it in metaphor. You're
Yeah.
doing it in this mandala
Yeah.
example, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's one of the things that I heavily bumped up against in reading this Hillman book and doing this research for the Dream video, is that all these cultures have this notion, whether it's the Bardo, the underworld, whatever it is. And the common features of that place are, the rules here are not the rules there. So just like in a dream, who you're with can change, right? Like one minute you're talking to your brother, the next minute you're talking to a woman, and it makes sense. Or the landscape, you just turn around and now you're in a different place, or whatever
Yeah.
it is. It's because when you get to the realm of psyche, those rules don't apply and concepts break down. And I have to imagine that when you die, if there is an afterlife and your psyche moves on, you eventually hit these points where concepts are just broken down. Like you don't have any earthly concepts to compare anything to anymore. And you're just sort of a raw expression of psyche
I
somehow,
would say
right?
thank God, right? I mean, if it
Yeah.
was just like this for infinity, we'd be in trouble. It's like, in a way, there would have to be an expansion of what beingness is, and certainly beyond time. Otherwise, it'd be pure torture.
Yeah.
And it seems to be more of a place of quiescence, as at least what these reports are, and one of reflection and rest, and just like it's just not this.
Yeah.
And then you start to think like, well, then if you wanted to literally influence or be part of this world in any way, you couldn't just manifest and be like, I'm gonna have a talk to my uncle who's still down there. It's like it would have to be through dreams and metaphor and strange synchronicity, because there is that boundary condition of the three-dimensional reality into these other dimensional spaces. And then you think about aliens and you think like, if they are in these other dimensional spaces, maybe it is not as simplistic as we can just come down and talk to you. It has to be a
Yeah.
crop circle, or it has to be,
Right. Yeah.
maybe you see us for a bit, but you're actually not seeing the whole thing. You know, it's a
Yeah.
representation.
And what
It's
if these are
metaphor.
just, and what if these aren't even like things like crop circles? Let's just use, again, assuming they're real. We assume that they're like direct messages for us. What if it's like the exhaust of an archetype? What if it's like just a little like trail of something that moved through and made an impression, and there really was no direct like, this is just for you, this is just this is telling you to stop throwing your cans on the ground or whatever it is, like what if it's literally just an image, and the image is what the image is, and we're trying to make it about us, we're trying to make it about something grand, and like really it's not even about us. Like that's one of those things that I just don't hear anybody discussing these things in this way. Like it always has to
Crop
be some
circles
like,
are weird. Yeah.
yeah, they
Or
are.
what if it's like it is working through humans in a co-creative like expression
Yeah.
in a strange way? Or it's collaborative in that sense. Or what if it's both? Like they create something and then we create something, and it's just like maybe it's play.
Right.
Maybe it's intentionally deceptive. Or maybe it's like we're missing the mark completely. It's like we're trying to describe things through mandalas essentially, because there's no real other way to
Right.
describe these things, and you're not going to get it fully, but that is the message.
Yeah.
It's like
Right.
it's in
Yeah. Yeah.
geometry, it's in shape, it's in art, because it is undescribable. We are coming from a different dimensional space. There's
Yeah.
no sentence they could write that would explain it.
Yeah. And to mildly de-woo it, there's serious physicists like Penrose who sincerely consider the notion of there being innate knowledge and something akin to the Platonic realm of forms, because there are these like, he actually has a an exploration of synchronicity where he's trying to, with his gigantic physics brain, like a guy who won a Nobel Prize with Stephen Hawking for physics, I believe, trying to explain like, could we just use physics to explain synchronicity? And he gets to this point where he's like, not fully. Because there has to be this almost exogenous source of pre-existing meaning that comes into the uh the mind of the individual. And he either directly calls it platonic forms, or he has some term like he made up for it. It's like negative information, or negative
Mm,
non input, or something like that. But he outlines this very technical argument and brings this third factor into it. And when I saw that, I was like, "Ooh, this is good. This is
that's
spicy."
cool.
Because it's like
Makes me think of dark
marrying.
matter,
Yeah,
right?
right,
It's
right,
like
right.
most
It's
of
like,
everything that we
yeah,
can't see, that we
yeah. It's like
don't know what it is.
we can feel like the signature of these things. Like, huh,
And
for
measure
this to
the
make
signature in a
sense.
sense. You can
Yeah,
measure the effect, but the thing
right.
itself,
Yeah.
not measurable yet.
One thing, we're running out of time, but one thing we haven't even brought into this conversation somehow is whether or not the delics are going to make all of this even harder to make sense of, or if they're going to somehow provide a balm to the masses to
Oh,
help?
I think the latter. Yeah, they help us feel an explanation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
And in many ways, that's what we talked about this earlier in the conversation. Part of our solution here is about feeling versus understanding. It's somatic in a sense. It's the unseen, and they help us make sense of ideas that are unideable. They're
Yeah.
ungraspable, and that's where we hit these walls. We're hitting so many walls with, I can't put my hand on that, or I don't know what, we don't know where that's going to go, or we don't even know what's happening over here anymore. And it's like your brain starts to go into panic and stress response, and you get into those spaces. And in some ways, you're finding the ground zero beyond the ideas. There's these meta understandings about what's going on that I can't describe to you now unless you've probably had these states of
Yeah.
understanding, but they're available to all of us. Matter of fact, they grow right out of the ground.
Right.
Uh, just thinking about that, it's like, why? Maybe one of the
Yeah.
first things that was on this planet alive. Maybe what
Yeah.
helped build the basis of organic life. Talk about galaxy brain right there. But it's like just
Right.
soils and things. And so there's a relationship there. I think there's more than causation.
Yeah. And
There's
speaking to galaxy
something
brain,
there,
yeah.
and it's been billions of years. So it's like,
Yes.
why? And it's
Yeah.
like, and I would just say, as Terrence would say, like, the answer is you can avail yourself of them just by the doorway of courage. It's right there
Yeah.
for you to experience, not for me to explain, not for some top down, like, okay, here's the answer, like the religion essentially was. It's like, no, no, no. You can go see for yourself and have your own understanding. And
Yeah.
that might be enough.
Yeah. It'll be enough for something. I don't know. I personally don't ever come out of those being like, I have answers. I have answers in the forms of questions I didn't even know I had. Is kind of what
Right.
happens. Like,
But you have a
oh,
feeling
yeah,
understanding that isn't the answer.
yeah.
That's what's in the space. It makes more sense.
Right. Yeah,
Which sounds like total bullshit delusion, but I'm just like, I don't know what to say to you. It's like, if you haven't done it, you don't have to. You certainly don't, but it's there.
right. No,
It's
it's
there.
definitely there, and it's going to be even more there in the coming year or two. I mean, even just you and me being at that conference, man. How gaslit do you feel just walking
Oh,
around the
psychedelic
city?
science, we should say.
Yeah.
Psychedelic science, yeah.
Like, how gaslit do you feel just walking around Denver where everything's decriminalized and it's like, huh, nothing's on fire. Everything's decriminalized and look, it's a fully operational, nice big city and people aren't just running around screaming, stabbing each other. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's stuff going on over there, but guess what? There's record number of shootings in my city this year and stuff is not decriminalized. So,
Yes, there's of course, yeah, we could go into the whole social element there of like maybe it helps. We'll see. I'd like to know more evidence about that, but I think what I'd like to end with though is bringing in just the element of the sacred,
yeah.
and not for us to, if anything, when I've been in any of those states or even here in the human just dimensional state, I'm humbled over and over again. My
Yeah.
own hubris hits the wall, and I'm humbled by things I thought I knew, things I think I'm in control of, and realizing how much grace we are given and how much we have and how much is just happening. It's just law unfolding.
Hmm.
And we have no choice but to ask for grace, to receive, please help, teach me. Teach me. I want help. Please, any help, if there is such a thing as help. And bringing in that element of sacredness to me is just saying like there's more than just what I can control with my mind, and I'm asking for more. I know I'm part of a bigger whole. Please use me. Please show me in any way that I may understand and bring more like love and just peacefulness to this world, or balancing of these scales. And that's the numinous comes through, and can give us that through music, through art, through all these different experiences. But that's kind of the salve that's out there for us, because it's not going to come from a particular destination, answer, or institution.
I felt that. I'm with that. That resonates. It is a wonderful way to wrap up this wonderful mind meld. I truly think this was our best one.
I enjoyed this the
I'm
most.
super
Yes.
excited, man. Super
No,
excited to put it
no,
out.
I'm not trying to critique the past, but
I'm gonna burn
I
them
think
all
it's
in a
because we
fucking
met in
fire.
person, you know?
Yeah.
And
We entangled molecules
there you go.
and some other things that we won't tell anyone about.